morning. You're watching Daybreak on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. But first, let's look at the headlines. Asian markets are off to a mixed start despite a positive close on Wall Street. Treasury yields rose for the fourth day in a row. Biocon will be in focus today after the biosimilar that it has with Mylan, that's pegfilgrastim, receives approval from the US FDA. Starbucks executive chairman Howard Schultz will be stepping down from his post and may run for presidency in 2020. And in the world of football, India beat Kenya 3-0 in captain Sunil Chetri's 100th international match. The skipper himself scored a brace. Now, turning to international news, ever since President Donald Trump threatened to pull out of talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, officials from both countries have been scrambling to salvage the planned summit and keep it on track for the 12th of June in Singapore. Now, a process that would normally take months is now being compressed into days, with meetings taking place between North Korean and American officials all over the world. Bloomberg's Joe Sobzich has this report.
There's been some numerous differing statements out of the White House, while not contradictory necessarily, somewhat inconsistent. They have said in the past that their maximum pressure campaign will continue, but the president himself has suggested that, well, there could be some incrementalism here, with Kim giving a little bit and the U.S. possibly giving a little as well. But they've not really set out a clear sort of set of goals for this meeting, and we've been whipsawed with expectations for what could take place from the initial euphoria out of the White House about the fact that it was happening at all, to it being canceled, and now it's being back on again. And it's only a day so far, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of time to give a back and forth on such a complicated issue.
All right. Senate Democrats want to weigh in. They want to have a voice in what's happening with that summit. They are asking for complete dismantlement, demanding it. But really, what kind of leverage do they have?
Well, they do have a little bit in that if the administration wants to lift sanctions, that will require congressional approval because some of these were congressionally imposed. And Democrats with a narrowly divided U.S. Senate have got leverage to block that from happening. They also will be needed if there is anything approaching a treaty down the road for their votes. What they're basically doing here is sort of raising the stakes for Trump. It's a bit of a political move, given that the U.S. midterm elections are coming up in less than 6 months. So they want to step in and say, you know, we're not to be ignored, and this is sort of setting a higher standard for Trump to meet.
All right, so clearly geopolitical issues to watch over the course of the next few days. With regard to trade in India, we'll come to it in just a short while, but there are indications of a muted start, at least to trade. What's happening in the rest of Asia? We're joined live by David Inglis from Hong Kong. David, good morning. How's it looking in the rest of Asia?
Well, you mentioned it, muted. I mean, we're coming off a decent session on Wall Street, but momentum really just, I guess, starting to really come off here as we make our way into mid-morning across the Asia-Pacific. Just a few markets coming online. You have Hong Kong, the Philippines, where inflation just came out a little bit more benign than forecast, and also Chinese markets coming online right now. I mean, broadly speaking, most stocks are still up as a percentage, I guess, of the total pie, but then again, you are getting the smaller sort of markets like New Zealand, for example, the Philippines, one of them, among those that are on the way up. So as far as, I guess, the weighting is concerned and the tilt on the seesaw, not really enough, I guess, to really turn out a substantial gain on the benchmark right now. So I'm calling it mixed, although, again, you are seeing some markets more tilted towards the upside here. As far as data is concerned, it's been positive so far. I mean, we had a flurry of PMI, Nikkei PMI data coming out, with the exception of Hong Kong. Most have actually been decent and fairly positive. I mentioned inflation out of the Philippines, which, along with India, I guess you could put those two countries together, were essentially where the problem, our hot spots were as far as inflation was concerned, perhaps in the case of the Philippines a little bit worse compared to India, but that being said, a little more benign, 4.6%, 4.9% was the expectation. And as far as where that actually is on the average for the Southeast Asian region, that's about double still. So yes, you are still seeing inflation on the way up, but I guess the increment is it might be starting to roll over. We'll see what happens there. And we're just looking ahead, of course, to the RBA. Out with its decision in about 3 hours from now. No changes expected there. In fact, you look at everything from forward curves to I guess futures, for example, on some of these funds, or implied probability on some of these funds as well. It doesn't seem like anyone's expecting them to move anyway all the way up until mid of 2019. So that's the story there, which takes me very quickly now to the bond space here. Yields are pushing up a little bit across the region, which I guess bodes, takes me back to what you just mentioned there, where US yields pushing higher for several days now.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that right now, David, because we're just going to figure out what exactly happened in that US session very quickly. Thanks so much for joining us, though, live. Well, Wall Street advanced on Monday with the Nasdaq Composite and Russell 2000 both closing at record highs as renewed signs of strength in the US economy helped offset concerns about a global trade war. Bloomberg's Sue Keenan wraps up all the Wall Street action in this report.
U.S. stocks rose to the highest levels since mid-March, and the Nasdaq hit a new record as it appears investors put trade war concerns on the back burner and focused on the optimism for the U.S. economy after that strong jobs data on Friday. We also had a mega merger in tech. Microsoft announced it is spending $7.5 billion to buy a coding site called GitHub. Apple reached an all-time high and is now within striking distance of $1 trillion valuation. We've never had a U.S. company valued at that level. And we also had a company called Canadian Solar drop almost 13%. Sign of the times, China changing the way it subsidizes solar companies, and China being a major part of the solar expansion here in the U.S., impacting a lot of these companies. Meanwhile, the founder and chairman of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, leaving the coffee chain later this month. He is, according to speculation, likely to try and seek a presidential office in his future. Schultz grew Starbucks from 11 stores to more than 28,000 in 77 countries during his time at the helm, and of course became a billionaire during that time as well. Oil was lower. There's a lot of concern that OPEC output cuts are going to be curtailed, and there's been a big increase in production here in the U.S. Sue Keenan, New York, Bloomberg.
Now, the big news coming in from the U.S. is that U.S. President Donald Trump has asserted his presidential power and escalated his efforts to discredit Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. Now, yesterday, Trump declared that he has the absolute right to pardon himself and attacked the investigation, calling it totally unconstitutional. Trump's comments on Twitter came a day after attorney Rudy Giuliani played down the possibility that the president could pardon himself, suggesting that he might have that authority but would be unwise to use it, and it may lead to his impeachment. Yet the former New York City mayor, who was not on the legal team when the letter was written, added that Trump probably does have the power to pardon himself, an assertion that in itself was challenged by legal scholars. He says that the president's legal team hasn't discussed that option, which many observers believe could plunge the nation into a constitutional crisis. All right, with that, let's turn to the Indian markets, and Darshan Mehta and Agam Vakil are here to set you up for the day's trade and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. Morning, guys. Darshan, indications of a muted start in India.
Yeah, it is, because global cues are doing well, but you know, we've had a downward slide. Yesterday was a big sell-off that happened both on the Nifty and the Bank Nifty, and the weakness continues on the SGX Nifty, which is trading down by almost 25 points at this point of time. So we are below the 10,600 mark in trade. Overall, if you're looking at what happened as far as the ADRs are concerned, most of the ADRs ended with a negative bias. Surprisingly, HDFC Bank was down 3% following what happened in India. ICICI Bank, Vedanta and Tata Motors were also down in trade. Probably the only ADR that managed to inch up was Infosys and Dr. Reddy's, but nevertheless, the close was rather weak. Now, after 3 days of intense selling, crude has managed to stabilize in trade today. It's up 0.5% on the WTI side, and Brent is trading up by almost 0.3%. As far as base metals are concerned, what happened on the LME, most of them did manage to have a decent day. So I think we will get back to what happened on the LME. So most of them did manage to inch up significantly in trade, except for tin, which was down 0.8%. Lead had a big rally; it was up almost 2.5%. Now, what's happening in China currently is that most of them have opened with a slight negative bias, no major bias, because zinc and aluminium are absolutely flat. Steel is down 0.5%, while copper is trading up. So not a bad day for commodities. Most of the precious metals are trading flat in today's trade. Now, how did the fund flow pan out in trade? What did the FIs and DIs do? And clearly what we're seeing is that FIs yesterday bought in almost 2,354 crores in the cash market. Probably a lot will have to do with the HDFC Bank FI limit opening up, and DIs sold in almost 712 crores in the cash market. Now, as far as the sectors and Nifty is concerned, the Nifty was rather weak in trade, but absolute carnage that was seen on the mid cap and small cap end of the market, over 1% and 3%, close to 3% for the small cap. Most of the sectors fell significantly in trade, but real estate and PSU banks were the one that took it to the chin. So heavy amount of selling that was seen on the counters. Now, basically the VIX moved up significantly, given the fact that the Nifty was rather volatile in trade, and the contribution 67 points down on the Nifty bank. On the Nifty itself, 34 out of the 67 was mainly on account of a 3% drop in HDFC Bank. Again, private sector banks are weak, so Kotak was down in trade. India Bulls was down in trade. A little bit of help coming in from Infosys and Reliance, but nevertheless it was HDFC Bank that actually caused the market to crack in trade yesterday. But Agam, what are the FNO sides indicating?
Well, Darshan, we did see weakness come through when it comes to the Nifty, even as we saw the Nifty come off to a certain extent. Now, talking about the way open interest has panned out, we're seeing some shorts building into the system. That said, when you consider the Nifty Bank as well, what we're seeing is a decline of around 1.6%. This was largely on account of HDFC Bank and the decline there, but unwinding and further longs unwinding as far as the Nifty Bank goes. The VIX inched up further to around 2.3, still within the range of 13 and 14, and the Nifty put call ratio did edge up lower to around 1.39. But in terms of the way we've seen changes in open interest, more and more writing in the 10,700 call, and this is around the mark that we are moving around. So this is a crucial level to watch out for before we start seeing the Nifty move and starting in direction. But when it comes to some of the stocks that we're watching out for, Sun TV is one of those few gainers in yesterday's day of trade. We've seen a short covering there. And we're also talking about PC Jeweler, which continues to face more pressure. In fact, down another 17%, 23% added in open interest. And TVS Motor Company from the auto pack continues to be volatile as well. That's also seen, some short build up. Watch out for these as we move into trade today.
All right, thanks so much for that, Agam. Let's take a quick check on the rupee and the bond market. The Indian rupee on Monday erased all gains and closed marginally lower against the US dollar as traders turned cautious ahead of the Reserve Bank of India's bi-monthly monetary policy outcome that comes out tomorrow. The rupee closed at 67.12 against the US dollar, down about 0.1% from its previous close. Now, the yield on the 10-year benchmark government bond also gained for the fifth consecutive session after a finance ministry official flagged off the possibility of an increase in the interest rates to curb inflation. That's essentially what everyone's talking about right now. The official also said that the meeting of the fiscal deficit target for the current financial year is challenging. Now, the 10-year bond yield stood at 7.874% at the close of trade yesterday, a few ticks higher from its close on Friday. All right, let's shift to commodities now, and Jayesh Khilani is here with all the updates there. Morning, Jayesh. Over to you.
Morning, Alex. Let me start off with oil prices, which are seeing some bit of uptick. If you look at the screen, about 0.5% gains for WTI and Brent as well. But remember that this is on the back of 1.6% loss that we saw overnight for WTI. Now, there is more and more evidence of OPEC relaxation. That is because if you look at the last month's number, so OPEC has pumped in about 31.9 million barrels a day for the last month, which is unchanged from the month of April as per a Bloomberg survey. So, more signs of relaxation. In terms of the inventory data, the US crude oil inventory is likely to drop by about 3 million barrels as per a Bloomberg survey. So wait and watch for that one as well. As far as base metals are concerned, the index itself climbed for a fifth consecutive session on the London Metal Exchange. Aluminium and copper were in particular focus because they climbed for the third straight day. while we had nickel, zinc and lead, which actually climbed on London Metal Exchange. And on the other hand, we had only one loser, which was tin, and it snapped its 4-day winning streak. But there's been some moves in the other agri space, so watch out for ice sugar and the Intercontinental Exchange cocoa that trades over there. Both of them have lost more than 4% overnight, so we'll get you the latest updates as soon as we get further rates over there. And if you look at the precious metal space, gold has been under some pressure, trading below the 1300 mark and has declined for the 4th consecutive session.
All right, thanks so much for that, Jayesh. Now, Biocon may well be the stock of the day, as the US FDA gave its approval to a particular drug, and now all of these are tongue twisters. I'm going to try it out. Pegfilgrastim. Now, the biosimilar it developed with myelin is what is called pegfilgrastim. Darshan Mehta is here with all the details. Darshan, that's a bit of a tongue twister, but how good is it for Biocon?
Yeah, it's really good because, they've been trying to get this approval for a while now. It's a drug that is jointly developed by Myelin and Biocon. So Myelin owns the drug. It will be manufactured at Biocon's Bangalore facility. Now, the target action date was yesterday. The US FDA gave the approval for the drug. It's a big drug. The sales size in the US is $4.2 billion. So it's a sizable chunk that that will come in. The revenue sharing is not known. Now, what happens is this drug pegfilgrastim, which is there, it's basically used to treat it's used in the treatment of cancer. Basically, what will happen is that Myelin has indicated that they will plan to launch the drug in the next few weeks. So that is something that is positive. Now, a couple of things, positive things that come out. First of all is that the approval comes in. It's the second drug from the Myelin Biocon stable that gets the approval, so revenues again will start flowing in. And secondly, and more importantly, this was filed from the Bangalore plant where Biocon had a US FDA inspection, in which case they got a Form 483 with 7 observation. Now, this approval gives an indication that all's well with the plant, and that should also work positively for Biocon.
All right, clearly one stock that you have to watch out for. Thanks so much for that, Darshan. There are several other stocks that you have to pay attention to in trade today, and Nikki Mitchandani is here to tell you all about those with the stocks in news. Nikki, morning.
Hi Alex. First one that we're tracking is on back of FDI hike in FDI limit, where Suntech Realty has increased its investment limit for FII from 24% to 49%. We also have Idea Cellular, which has got an approval from DOT to increase FDI limit from 67.5 presently to 100%. In terms of buyback, two companies there, Wiseman Forex, which is expected to buy back at least 3.77% equity of around 31 odd crore at a price of around 702 per share, which means a good 24% premium as compared to the current market price. Also, Jagran Prakashan, which is expected to buy as much as 4.8% equity at a price of around 209 for a sum of around 292 crore and at a price of 195 per share, which means a premium of a good 18 to 19% from the current market price. Apart from Biocon in the pharma space, we also are tracking Lupin, which has gotten US FDA approval for one of its cream required to be treated for infection. In other news, we're tracking MCX, which has completed a deal to acquire 24% in CDSL commodity repository. Also, we have Sudarshan Chemicals, which has divested its plastic master batch business. Maruti Suzuki on back of total production numbers, which have shown a 22% uptick for the month of May, and also Westbridge Capital, which has invested a good 65 crore in Kacharia Cement.
All right, thanks so much for that, Nikki. Let's check out the big brokerage calls of the day. Somit Sarkar is here to tell you all about them. Morning, Somit.
Good morning, Alex. On the big brokerage calls for the day, first we have is Investec on Shriram Transport Finance. Now, the brokerage has cut the rating on the stock to sell from buy and has raised the target price to 1,500 from 1,340. Now, according to the brokerage, Shriram Transport, which is a dominant player in the used CV segment, would see a muted growth going forward according to the brokerage. Now, the used CV pool, that is vehicles that are 5 to 10-year-olds is expected to see a muted growth over the next 4 years, according to the brokerage. Along with this, the new BS4 vehicles are structurally efficient, according to the brokerage. As they are fuel efficient, they attract lower finance costs because of the lower interest rate scenario. The maintenance cost on these vehicles are low, and the net cost is also low because of the input tax credit that comes in post GST. However, on the positive side, the vehicle scrappage policy could drive demand and growth for Shriram Transport, says the brokerage. Lastly, the brokerage believes that the fundamentals are weak, especially on the growth side over the longer term for Shriram Transport. Second, we have a credit source on Indian IT sector. Now, according to the brokerage, year to date, the Indian IT sector has outperformed the benchmark on the back of lower institutional ownership, high valuation in other sectors, hope of growth pickup in the IT sector, and INR depreciation. However, the brokerage says that the fundamentals are largely the same for the large companies, but for the mid-sized companies, they have been revised upwards for financial year 2019. Now, Tech Mahindra, HCL Tech, Persistent and Cyient are the top picks. However, they have raised the rating on a host of stocks like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL Tech, Tech Mahindra, Mindtree, Hexaware, Cyient, Persistent and NIT Tech, but they have raised the rating only on Wipro to neutral from underperform, while they have cut the rating on NIT Tech and Hexaware from neutral. For Hexaware, it has been cut to underperform from neutral, and for NIT Tech it has been cut to neutral from outperform.
Thanks so much for that, Somit. Now, on to a game that I hold very close to my heart. It was game number 100 for India's football team captain Sunil Chhetri yesterday, and the public responded to his plea and call for support. In fact, the stadium in Mumbai was sold out. Not just that, a host of top sports persons ranging from Sachin Tendulkar to Virat Kohli congratulated Chhetri on his achievement. And India won that match 3-0 against Kenya. Here's the message that Sunil Chhetri left for his fans.
To everyone who is not a football fan, please come and watch us. 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the best game in the world. And number 2, we play for our country. We'll make sure that once you come to watch us, you will not go the same person back home. To all of you who are fans of big European clubs and support your European clubs with so much passion, and sometimes you guys think that the level is not same, so why to waste your time? Agreed, the level is not the same, not even close. But with our desire and determination, we'll make sure, we'll try our best to make your time worth. To all of you who have lost hope or do not have any hope in Indian football, I request you, come and watch us in the stadiums.
And did people come and watch? It was a phenomenal experience for all who were present. In fact, Ayush Elavadi from Bloomberg Quint was at the game, and he had quite a lot to talk about. You should check that out on the website. It's there. Apart from that, you'll find several stories that you can read, and here are just a couple of them. Idea Cellular has said the telecom department has approved raising the foreign direct investment limit in the company to 100%, putting its merger deal with Vodafone in the last leg of regulatory clearance. And there's an update on the insolvency process. In a move that will bring relief and clarity to acquirers of insolvent companies, SEBI has said that these companies can be delisted without following the prescribed methods under its delisting regulations. All right, that's all we have for you on Daybreak, but there's a lot more on the other side of this very short break. All you need to know is up next. Do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.